In this week's video, we're going to look at setting up a tank for Neocardiina. So I'm going to go through the basics, products required, how to set it up, what I do, and then ultimately we'll put shrimp in at the end of this, so it'll be shot over a period of time. So products from the start then. So the first thing we need is a tank and Blue Peter badge. I've got one there in front of me. So I'd suggest a minimum requirement of 25 litres for a Neocardiina tank, and obviously 50 litres is better. For the purposes of this video, I'm only using a 20 litre aqua L cube. It's called a shrimp set. I broke the glass for the top of it, so I have used this tank before, and I'll potentially make another lid for it if I lose a lot through evaporation. The reason I'm only using a small tank is because I have some orange Neocardiina, and some are high quality and some are medium quality and some are low quality, and what I want to do is select the higher quality ones out and put them in their own tank and start sort of breeding a line of really deep dark orange. If you can hear any noise in the background, apologies. You might hear my pugs snoring at the moment. I think one of them is actually just yakking up, or no, he isn't. But so yeah, first thing we need is a tank. Second thing we're going to need is a filter. So for the purposes of this, I'm using a double sponge filter. And the idea of a double sponge filter is it's driven by air. So we'll use an air pump as well, which I do have conveniently. Oh, here it is. I do have conveniently around. So we've got a small air pump with a non-return valve and an adjustable valve, so I want to be able to adjust the airflow and the flow on this double sponge. You can use powered filters, I suppose. I'm not a fan. I like a nice soft quiet environment in a shrimp tank, and the benefit of a sponge is it gives the shrimp somewhere to graze on the biofilm that will collect on that sponge. Creates low flow, doesn't use up a massive amount of room, so in this build we're going to be using an air pump, a sponge. We'll use some substrate. So this is some that's pre-washed. This is a very dark black substrate, which is going to work really nice with a bright orange shrimp. Then we'll have lighting. So this shrimp set actually comes with a lid, a light and a filter, and this is a really good light, just clips on the side of the tank. It's very bright, that light is. So we'll get that used as well. And then in addition to that, we'll need an ammonia source. So an ammonia source to feed the beneficial bacteria that are going to create a living biological environment for your shrimp, bacteria that will break down their waste and convert that waste into harmless or less harmful chemical solutions. So if you don't know already and you're not a shrimp keeper, have a look at the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle starts with ammonia waste that the animals produce. The bacteria convert that into nitrite, which is a nitrogen based compound which isn't as toxic as ammonia but is still toxic, and then other elements of the bacteria convert that nitrite into nitrate. So nitrate can be used by plants, but we also do water changes periodically to reduce the nitrate levels in our tank. High nitrates isn't good, some nitrates is okay. In addition to that, then we're going to be using Milli-1. So this is a bacterial powder. So yes, I'm going to put an ammonia source in this tank, but I need to then seed it with the bacteria. Follow the dosing instructions. This just goes in the tank and it sort of starts that bacterial growth process off and time. In addition to that, we're going to need a test kit. So we want to be able to test for, in the initial stages, we want to be able to test for ammonia, nitrite and nitrate realistically, pH as well, and then as you get more advanced and looking into this, you'll probably want to test for carbonate hardness and general hardness. Speaking of carbonate hardness and general hardness, my tap water is okay for Neocardiina, so I could potentially use my tap water and then treat that tap water with a dechlorinator, or stand the tap water for 24 hours to let any free chlorine evaporate from that water. For those of you that know me, you know that I use reverse osmosis water, and because I use reverse osmosis water, I will put the minerals back into that reverse osmosis water to where I need those, and for that I'd use salty shrimp. We'll assume for the purposes of this build that we're going to use tap water. So other products that we may use then, so I'm looking for it. So I'm going to put a substrate in, and then I don't just want the tank bare. I could put bits of rock and wood and stuff, and I tend to choose inert rocks in all of my tanks, but Neos you can get away with like a cereal stone or something like that. All I'm going to do for this tank, because I'm going to keep it simple, is I'm going to use a piece of cholla wood, but the teddy bear cholla, the thick, the chunkier stuff, somewhere for the shrimp to graze on, mooch through, make their environment a little bit more appealing, somewhere for them to hide. And then what I'm going to do to that piece of cholla wood, or choya, if you pronounce it correctly, is I'm going to attach some living moss. The moss is called Hookeracea moss, or otherwise known as hooker moss, and it sort of carpets over something that you put it in. So in order to attach that, I can do one of two things. I can wrap it around with fishing line and sort of strap that down until it grows up. The problem for me with fishing line is that with fishing line, there's possibilities that shrimp can get stuck behind the fishing line. So I'm not a massive fan of the fishing line unless it's on like a flat piece of mesh where it's completely strapped down and the flat mesh is on the substrate itself, so shrimp can't really get under it. But on a piece of choya wood, I'm looking over there because I've got it soaking at the moment. So on a piece of choya wood, I'll glue that moss down, and my glue of choice is a gel type cyanacrylate glue. The one I use is from Moss UK, and it's Escapers glue. It's a gel glue. You can get it in a runnier version, so the runny version, but what I found with the runny version is when you're gluing moss down to something that's wet, you end up with huge white patches where the glue's ran. With the gel you can be more precise. So with all that being said, I hope I haven't bored you too much. Let's get to building this tank. I put the light on the aquarium so that you guys can see this a little bit better. I did record it was dark, hence why there's still a bit of black in the bottom. But what I'm going to do is now put in the substrate. So there's 2 litres here. It was used from another tank, and I'm just recycling that. So there is a bit of dust that comes up off this, but if it's wet and you've just washed it, you shouldn't get that. What I'm keen to do here though is, instead of just piling it in, what I want to do is slope this towards the back. So shallow at the front and taller at the back, or taller at the back. You don't have to be perfect. You could have it sloping up into one corner, and it's just to give that aesthetic of depth. Now we're ready to add our filter, and I've opted for a slightly different filter. So it's still a sponge, but I've opted in this case for a single sponge, just because of the size of the tank. I don't need anything bigger than that, and it's more than enough to cycle this tank. Next steps then, if I'm not putting a background on, would be to fill this with water. I'll squeeze the sponge out so it attracts water, add an ammonia source, and my preference is Dr. Tim's. You can add fish flakes, but likewise I also want to add a bacterial powder, and as I showed you at the beginning, the bacterial powder that I'll be using is Milli 1. So let's get this filled up and then we'll go through the rest of the process. It's been a good few days since I last recorded anything on here. I filled it up this morning. The water that I filled it up with is a little bit cold. I used RO water and remineralised, but again we're going to speak about this as though we were using tap water. What I have done since we last recorded anything, I have painted the back, and I've used this sort of artist's acrylic paint and give it a couple of coats. The reason I've used acrylic is if I decide I don't want to have a background on at some point later, I can easily peel this off or get a Stanley blade, underneath it, a razor blade, and just peel that off. So I have filled this morning. Now unfortunately, so let's move that out of the way. Unfortunately, if I can get this into shot, the piece of wood that I wanted to use, I have been soaking, but as you can probably see from well, I'll lift this up actually. As you can see, it hasn't yet sunk, and what I wanted to do was glue some Hookeracia moss to that. So I think what I'm going to do instead is just move the camera slightly, and these are some trimmings of Hookeracia that I've took, and they've been in a bag for absolutely ages. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of these stainless steel mesh just to sort of get these. I'll use it as a place for them to go in, if I'm honest, but I'll also be selling these, so stainless steel mesh with hooker moss on. And to do those, I do need to use a fishing line. So I do a bit of fly fishing from time to time, so I use a leader for my fly fishing that has, it's this, I can't think of the name of it, but it's fluorocarbon. So fluorocarbon has the same properties as water from a visual perspective, so you can't see it, but I do need to sort of tie these quite tight. So the only thing left to do with the tank really, other than let it run, is we haven't yet put in any Bacta. So what we'll do, and I do want to put in a thermometer as well. So initially this is just going to sit, I'm on the kitchen table if you haven't gathered that, but I'm initially just going to sit in the sit it on the kitchen table until I get moaned at to the point. But it is going to go where the spiders currently are, and I'm literally just going to sort of sprinkle some of this over the top. It will go down, it will sort of colonize, it will get sucked into the sponge, it will sort of move around, might cloud the water for a couple of days, but let's get, well, you can see it clouding the water. So let's change the camera angle. I'll get this down and we'll do some not slow-mo, some time lapse of me tying up a few of these, and we'll get a couple of them in here. I might put a few in there just somewhere for them to sort of get light and sort of establish, but let's go through that and see where we go. Things we're going to need then are the moss itself, a poor light in here, so apologies for that, the fluorocarbon, pair of scissors and some mesh. I'm only going to do one or two just so you guys get the gist of this, but I'll set this on time lapse and we'll crack on. So there's our first one, and what will happen is a few bits may fall off, so I might give this a rinse, but what will happen is that over time this will just grow back up and it will grow into almost a mound. So it's really nice stuff. Can't wait to get some of this onto the cholla wood once it sinks. But that's one of them done. I can obviously do another couple. I'll get another one done and we'll get them into this tank. So both of those in the tank, I might put one a bit further back. I may get a few little bits sort of float off them, but I'll sort of pick those out as and when. And what will happen, they will start to grow upwards and root and attach themselves to the mesh pad and eventually cover the mesh pad. I've got some massive ones in the garage in my blue bolt tank. So we'll let that cycle, so it's got its Bacta in. We'll let the sponge cycle. I'll add an ammonia source, so I need to find my bottle of Dr. Tim's. I may add some fish flake if I can't find that. And then we'll come back to this when it's time to add some shrimp in. And I'm going to select some really nice orange shrimp. So until then, keep watching, and the next bit we'll get the shrimp and sort of, I'll do some tests on it. I'll go through the tests with you guys, show you how to test and what to test for, and likewise what we'll do is we'll go and add some shrimp. Audio might sound a little different, but I've moved it over onto my little desk space, so this is where the spiders used to be, and I'm reluctant, so this is all my camera equipment, but I'm reluctant to sort of show you where the spiders are in case that video comes out afterwards. But tank's up here for now, sort of a temporary one. I might change it around a little bit, so I might move some of the stuff off the back of there and have it sort of facing towards me, just because the slope is towards the front, because I didn't have a plan on where I was putting that. But couldn't find my Dr. Tim's, so at the moment it's got a few fish flakes in, and we'll just let that cycle. So as you guys can see, I've been putting fish flake into this tank. I've put an air stone in just to sort of circulate it a bit, and I haven't yet done the cholla wood, but we'll go and test this now because I want to see if there's any ammonia in this tank. So the test kit we're going to be using is the API test kit, just to sort of test for ammonia. And what I usually do before I use a test vial is I put a drop of water in it, give it a shake, so tank water, empty that out. And the idea of that is because what I want to do is I want the, let's get this up a second, I want the vial to be completely clear, and what I do is I use a syringe to take water from the tank. Now the reason I use a syringe is just so that I can be more accurate rather than dipping this in. So the API test kit, this is an old one, probably out of date to be fair. Master test kit, I don't use it for pH, I use Sera for pH, mainly for my Cardiina tanks, but the ammonia and the nitrite and all the other tests are pretty good. This one doesn't do KH and GH, but we've got 2 bottles, so bottle 2 8 drops, bottle 1 8 drops. So let's get our 8 drops in. And a little trick that I found is if you squeeze the bottle first before you invert it, what happens is after you've put your 8 drops in, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, when you let go it doesn't have excess drops around the lid. So just a little trick that I learned ages ago. And the same with bottle B, so squeeze it slightly before you put it in, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and then if you let go it just sucks any back in that are hovering on the top. So I'm hoping there's some ammonia in here, because I expect there to be some ammonia. So this is my ammonia gauge, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for some ammonia, to be honest. So I don't want it bright yellow, I want it to have a bit of colour. So it is a little bit green, and on the basis that it's green I'm going to repeat that entire process with, let's just swirl this one out a second, with the nitrite test kit, because I want to see if it started to produce nitrite yet. And as I say, this is why I use the syringe. It just makes life so much easier, and you can sort of get it right onto the drop there. And if we find our nitrite, so the nitrite's the next one to it. So there is a little bit of ammonia in there. I hope there's a bit of nitrite too. I don't expect there to be. It's going to take a bit longer, I think. 1 2 3 4 5. So the nitrite one is 5 drops. You have to read the instructions on these. I don't sell these, by the way, so I'm not trying to promote or publish anything. But realistically, what I would like is, I would like this to have some purple in it, which would suggest that the bacteria's converting the ammonia to nitrite. And if I'd got nitrite, then what I'd do is I'd test for nitrate, and if I got none of each, I'd test, once I knew there was ammonia, I'd go through this and sort of wait for the ammonia to convert to nitrite and then to nitrate. And if I'd got a nitrate reading but none of the others, it would suggest that I'd got my process had finished, but it hasn't yet finished. So what I'm going to do is add some bacteria. I mean, there's definitely some ammonia in there, but it hasn't started converting yet. So I'll add some more fish flake and I'll add some more bacteria to this tank. Just a shortcut in, I've used my phone for this, but I've done a nitrite test, and as you can see there's definitely nitrite in there. So what I've found from experience is that once you've got nitrite, it's usually a few days until that clears, and just keep an eye on that. So I'll show you the tank quickly. So I have put the piece of cholla in there now, and what I'll do is once these start to grow, these pads, I'll put these up for sale, but it does grow lovely. And once the testing's complete, what I'll do is I'll siphon out all this dead fish flake and stuff. So it looks like it's definitely sort of coming along. I'll do a 95% water change on this, as I said, and next bit we'll get the shrimp in. Just as a quick comparison, I decided to do an ammonia test. So as you can see, the ammonia is almost yellow, and to the right of that is ammonia and then nitrite. So the bacteria has converted the ammonia to nitrite, and what we're waiting for now is for the bacteria to turn the nitrite into nitrate, and once that's done, that's when I'll do my full water change. I tested the nitrites yesterday and there was a slight bit of purple, but today that's completely blue. And what I'm doing is I've got my water here in a bucket, and so obviously all plugged in. I've got my float valve set up, and when I cycle a tank I take sort of 95 to 99% of the water out, and I actually cycled that on some fish flakes that we sell. But we'll get this filled up. I have turned it round, so I've turned it round the other way so that the slope goes into the back corner. Give the glass a bit of a wipe, take some of the algae off, and we'll get it going, and then we'll get some shrimp in. So the final part of this tank build then is unboxing. Now I have taken the tape off this. I did start filming, but it took me forever to get the tape off, and I've not opened this yet, so you guys will be seeing this for the first time with me. And I know we were planning on putting orange shrimp in here, but we made a change of plan, and if we open this, just check that they're alright first. So you may notice that these shrimp aren't orange, so they're from a good friend, Crustaceans. So thank you very much, Crustaceans. So Crustaceans wouldn't take payments off me for these. I've done Crustaceans a couple of favours, and I was more than happy to pay for them, but they're a nice grade green jade and they will colour up. So what we're going to do is we're going to get these in a jug, and I'll show you guys how then I drip acclimate these. Now I may not be able to drip these as I want to, but just because of the height of the tank, but let's give it a go and see how we get on. So what I've done is I've used an air stone in the tank with a small piece of pipe. So I've actually used the one that we had in there, and I put a metal valve on, and the reason I've used the metal valve is because a metal valve is a little bit heavier. I've created a bit of a siphon, and then what I'm going to do is just drip like this, so you can see roughly the flow. And before I did this, I've acclimatized them to my room temp, so they've been sat in the jug for a couple of hours, and just to sort of acclimatize them to the temp of my room. Now that drip may be a little bit fast, so obviously the purpose of an airline and an air valve is that you can adjust that. A little bit more. So there we go. I'll just run it slow for a bit, get a few drops in, probably 50% more water in that jug, and then I'll probably increase that then to how it was before. But that's sort of a drip enough, you know, drip every couple of seconds to acclimate them, and then once that's done we'll net them out and put them in the tank, and we'll do a bit of video. So a good bit of time has passed, at least an hour, think maybe 2 hours, so it sits up well over an hour. And as you can see, we're sort of almost double in the water volume. I did increase the drip slightly, as you can probably see from the drip. And then what I've done, I've given the tank a bit of a clean. I haven't taken all of the string algae out, but I've taken a lot of it out. There's been in there a rabbit snail for a couple of days, and I dislodged him. He was on the back wall. And I've also taken out the bit of choya wood with the hookeration moss on, just because it had lots and lots of algae on it, and I've dropped it into another tank where I know that I'll strip that fuzz algae off. So with all that being said, then let's take our net and let's get our first shrimp in the tank. And with hindsight, maybe having a black substrate with green shrimp wasn't the best idea. We originally planned to put in orange shrimp, hence why I went for a black substrate, but it is what it is. And so these are really good quality from my good friend Carishan, who's also a customer, and I've been sort of dealing with him for quite a while. So good net full there. Just gently let them in. There's one still, there's two still in the net. So there's a little baby, teeny one. And we've got 4 left, so there's 2. So we ended up with 12, so some really nice grades and a couple of juvenile, well, babies really. And we'll let these settle in. I'll pick back up when they've sort of settled in and wrap this video up. So we'll do a bit of video of the of them sat in. I'll get some close-up shots of them as well, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you found it interesting and useful. So there will be a little bit of video with them settled in, but until next time, thanks for watching.